Give her a call.
All right, are you guys ready to get started again?
Yes.
That's great. Got your coffee, got your water. I made some cookies for you guys, so that's a good way to get on straight. All right, so your handouts for today are on your table, so you guys will make sure that you get a packet, and you're going to put that in your notebook as a continuation, and we'll continue to collect some good resources in that notebook. So, all right, Jay's going to take it away.
All right. So one of the best ways to learn is by actually doing rather than talking about it. So today is all about worship. And that's why we want to start by going, let's actually do it rather than sit around and hypothetically talk about it. Let's do it. And now we're going to spend pretty much the rest of the day kind of picking it apart and kind of looking at why we did what we did, how we did, and all of that. One of the most neglected parts of worship planning and running is in evaluating what you did. Okay, we tend to just rush on to the next thing. And that's because, as fast as you know, Sunday comes twice a week. I mean, it's just always right. It's always pressing down on you. So the temptation is to run quickly past last week and move forward. We feel like evaluating is essential. It's just crucial. We even evaluate how we evaluate. I mean, that's how much we spend time evaluating. Now, typically, if this had been a real Sunday morning service, what I would be doing at this point right now, following that service, would be going around to all the children ministries apologizing for running late. Okay, now if you go and say, I'm so sorry, I got carried away, and it was totally my fault for talking too long, because that would have thrown the whole system into chaos. But for us, normally we have a 15-minute turnaround time on from our first service to our second service, so there's no way I could run that long in there. So I wouldn't typically do that in a normal service, but I knew we had all day, so I felt a little freer to just jump off on rabbit trails, which I normally wouldn't do. So what we're going to evaluate is, one of the things you want to think about is, what do you want to see? Think about the outcome that you're looking for. So when I'm evaluating, I'm going, what is I'm hoping to accomplish? Did we accomplish that? And make sure the questions that we're asking reveal to us if we're getting what we wanted to see. So for instance, in our evaluation process, we very used to start with the numbers. You know, what was the attendance? What was the giving? And that tended to put us all in a very bad mood. So we've kind of shifted away from that. Not that they're not important, because every one of those numbers represents a person, and every person that's giving represents a changed lives. So we do want to pay attention to that. We just don't do that every week. So what is it that you're wanting to see? So for us, one of the things we want to see people's lives being changed. You know? And so how are we measuring? How are we finding out if people's lives are being changed? Another thing we want to see is we always want to realize that there is room for improvement. So we don't want to get into reading our own press and talk. It was great. It was wonderful. Oh, it was so beautiful. It was just really neat. So if you were here on a Sunday, somebody was asking me about, who was it? Yeah. So you're talking about wanting to come and visit on a Sunday. So on a Sunday, like if after a service, if you were just sort of watching me, you would begin to see me going to a few key people saying, talk to me. And they're probably staff. They're probably staff people that I'm going to talk to and go and give me some feedback, particularly new staff. So in your case, it might be a new visitor that's coming. I really want their input. And typically the way it goes with our staff is like this. I would come and say, hey, how'd you think the talk went? Did you see ways to improve? And they will say, no, I thought it was great. I think you're wonderful. It was great. I'm like, okay. So next week I go back and say, how'd you think the talk went? Can you see ways to improve? No, I thought it was great. Probably after that twice, I'm going to swing back around with them next week and go, hey, I pay you to make it better. And if you can't figure out a way to make it better, I'm going to begin to wonder why I'm paying you. You know, I really want you to be critical and pick it apart. So don't fall into just going, oh, it's great, it's wonderful. There's some way it can improve. Okay. Even in that service, we missed several things and we had to adjust on the fly, kind of going through. Luckily, we kind of caught them in route, but you can always get better. So don't let it be a praise fest of just how wonderful it all was. Push back against that a little bit. And to do that, you've got to really foster a culture of honest feedback. So if you were to say to me, well, I felt like you ran a little long, and I went, well, I had a lot to say. That's too defensive. I just need to go, that's a great point. Thank you for that. And as the lead person, you have to model it. If you're not willing to take feedback, it just shuts the whole thing down. And here's the thing. The feedback that you may give might be not that helpful. I mean, literally, it might not be really that good. But if I go, I don't do that, he's not going to say what he was going to say, which would have been crucial. So I got to create that culture where there's no, one of the things we say is love every idea for 30 seconds. For at least 30 seconds, that's wonderful, that's great. After 30 seconds, you may be like, maybe not. But at least give it consideration for a while. So work on that culture. And then secondly, don't make it about you. Don't make it about you. It's not personal. Don't take it personal. Don't own it like it's yours. Hold it very loosely, and it's ours. We're all a part of this. And when they begin to feel ownership, their contributions, both in the evaluative process and in the planning process, are going to be much more helpful. So don't be controlling or taking tight ownership. Do I feel like I own the service? Absolutely. Does Ann feel like she owns the service? Absolutely. Does Gracie? Does Josh? Does everybody? Absolutely. And I want them all to have that sense of this is ours. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that? One of the things and actually Lynn and I were talking about this week. One of the things I talk about with pastors is going, look, no matter how great a job you do, God is going to be no more God at the end of the day. And no matter how poorly you do, he's going to be no less. So you don't really have a big stake in this game here. I mean, no, we don't, it's a privilege to get to teach God's word. And so we prepare well and we try to do our best, but I don't take credit for when lives are changed. Therefore, I don't feel shame when they're not. Yeah.
When you say don't make it about you, and I know sometimes the elephant in the room, when you don't feel like you've done such a great job. And a lot of times the enemy beats you up with that because you really want to face it. You just don't look like it. Sunk in, got get home. Can you evaluate a little bit on that?
Yeah. And again, I told Lynn a perfect story about that this week. I tend to confess how poorly I've prepared. Matter of fact, I don't know if any of you see it, but so right before I go up and teach, I anoint myself with oil. So during the song before that said, I do this everywhere I go. I take a little oil and I'll just do it in the name of the Father, the name of the Son, the Holy Spirit. And then I surrender myself to God. I ask for God for forgiveness in the not being as fully prepared as I should have been, and to take me and use me as an instrument. And then I take another one and I put it under my nose because I want to smell it the whole time. I want to smell the anointing and I want to operate that. So I confess my lack of preparation beforehand. I surrender to God's will, and then immediately follow. I confess again that I didn't give His word as clearly as it should be given. I didn't. Why is this convincing? Is all of these. And so for me, it's just confess, preach, confess. It's just one. But time and time again, God has showed me it's not. The story I told her was I was preaching over at St. Simon's, and it was terrible. I mean, I was confused. I did not do a good job. So literally during the communion time, I went to the altar and was praying, and I was literally praying. Don't kick me off the team. I mean, I know I blew that, and I'm just, and this guy walks up, taps me on the shoulder, and I'm like, what? And he's like, would you be willing to pray with me to accept Christ? And I'm going, were you in this service? I mean, did you just walk out the street? I mean, who are you? Did you come over from big church or something? I didn't know what it was, but it was God just thumping me in the head and going, you're not messing up my plan. So now, that does not mean don't prepare. That does not mean don't do your best. I mean, absolutely. But I'm doing that in response because God's been so good to me. How can I not try to give Him my best? How can I not? So I'm not talking about being lazy. I'm not talking about, shirking. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, here's the thing for me, okay? I can give a talk. I mean, I can If I showed up at your church and you said, hey, Jake, walk up here, and I could walk up and give a talk. Just off the cuff, do it. And I could probably make you laugh, and I could probably make you cry in it. But I cannot take you into the presence of God and have your life forever changed. Only God can do that.
Amen.
So I have to keep that in mind. And so the whole time I'm up there, I'm going, it's not about me being cute or clever or I don't want people to say, well, Jake's a good teacher. I want them to come out and say, God's a good God.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and every week I fail. Every week I fail to do that. So I confess. But I don't beat myself up over it. I don't feel, I mean, it's quick. I anoint, I pray, I surrender, I ask God to work through me. And then right at the end, I go, sorry, I didn't do better, God. But it's in your hands.
I found that sometimes when I get through and I think, man, did I blow that? It affected somebody in that thing that needed to hear that.
Yeah. So go to Pentecost. Okay. If you go back and read Pentecost, the miracle is not in the speaking; it's in hearing.
Right.
Everyone heard in their own language. So the miracle happens between your mouth and their ears very often, and that God's speaking to them. Oh, over here. So this is the questions that we try to work through when we're evaluating the service. So we're going to real quickly just kind of go through and evaluate that service we just experienced. So the questions are, what happened this weekend? So we would be evaluating all of our worship services and our campus ministries and our youth ministries, everything. And then we talk about, well, you got it up there too. Whose life was changed? What was the impact in your life? Did it change and impact your life? If it's not happening to you, it's probably not going to be down the line. And then what were the takeaways? What went really well? What could have been improved? Why would people want to come back? What was it that made them come back? And that could be something that happened that was really neat, or it could be a hook we put in for next week. We may have said something was coming up either way. So let's just walk through that real quick. What happened? What were some of the things you noticed in the service today?
Taught how to pray.
Say again?
Taught a way to pray.
Taught a way to pray. So there was a teaching component about how to pray, and we did it not just through words, but actually participating in it. Yeah.
The worship music was amazing, just coming from everyone.
Okay. Yeah. So there was a lot. The worship leading was quality, and the people's response was equally involved. Yeah.
You also engaged everyone by having them read the scripture. They become part of ownership of the service.
Yep, absolutely. So we had lots of elements that we were looking in of how do we get people participating. Could have I have read the scripture? Absolutely. Absolutely could have, But that was a way to get everybody involved. And it made it feel much more like a conversation than just a lecture. Anything else?
May I ask, is that what you do in regular big worship at all?
I could, but normally no. I normally, but I might occasionally, but no. And one of the things for that is that
You're saying about the scripture reading.
the scripture reading. She said, normally I wouldn't pass that scripture. Although I may include people in some aspect of the service like that. But how about things that happened before worship began? What were some of the things that were going on? Coffee. Yeah. Fellowship, exactly. Yeah. Hopefully you were greeted, that you were kind of given instructions about what was happening, where we were going to be, so that you didn't feel totally. I mean, it's pretty strange. You're in a different church. It's a different setup. You're going over here, but they're over there. So it could have been very confusing and unsettling for you. But hopefully there were a lot of things that just naturally kind of made you feel a little bit more at home.
Your sign. That's the first thing I saw. You can breathe now. You're at home.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And so we're trying to convey that in a lot of different ways to just relax. So.
Where was it? None of us at this table saw that sign.
The information desk
Next
is
to the
right
coffee.
there as you walk in.
Oh, you distracted me.
I was at the
I'm
coffee.
sorry.
Somebody's more observant than the rest of us.
Any other elements that you saw that happened?
Like meeting was before.
Communion?
Yes.
That was interesting. You went back.
Actually asking questions, just saying, come be forgiven.
Yeah, and so the questions that I used are, if you go through our Methodist liturgy, that's basically what it's walking you through. So I didn't go through the book and do it, but that's really what it is. That's the flow through it. And it's also, and I didn't say this with you, but I would often say this. I would say, the basic questions are: do you love God? Do you seek forgiveness of your sins? Do you confess and repent? And then will you give your life to God to be used for His purposes? And so I would say that I'd go, which that is what being a follower of Jesus means. That's when people talk about becoming a Christian, that's what they're saying, is that they love God because He loves them. They see their sin, they ask for forgiveness, they repent, and then they surrender their life to His control. So if you do that, you are taking a step to become a follower of Jesus. But I might explain a little bit more in a larger context. But
One of the things I liked about the service was it was a comfortable service.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't, you didn't have to sit there and just afraid to move or no. You was comfortable in it.
Yeah, and that's part of the communion is we want to get people up and move. And so that service, although it had a lot of participation, it didn't have a lot of movement. So ideally we might even try to incorporate a little bit. I mean, you were up singing and down, but the more you can get people physically moving, that's good. And that was actually a long service. Okay, that was how long did we go, Ann? A minute what?
Hour and 15.
Hour and 15 minutes. So that was long.
Actually, an hour and 11 to be exact.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's not as long as I thought. And that was pretty much my fault because I kind of went long in the message part. Although I think we had one extra song in the normal routine there. But hopefully it didn't feel real long because you were breaking it up in different components. So,
The ambiance was amazing.
Yes.
yeah. So one of the things that happened is a lot of work was put into the environment, just setting that up. All right, whose life was changed? Which for us that would just be us. But, well,
My life was
yeah. For me, the whole standing between the angels and the saints,
Yeah, man.
that was really like an eye opener for me. Going, that is literally what my job is, getting to do that. And that was kind of reminder, which made me feel very grateful to God. Oh God, thank you for letting me do this for a living.
My faith was taken to whole new levels,
Good. Can anybody tell? So we'll talk in a couple of weeks about sermon preparation. Can anybody take a stab at what my big idea was? Particularly, what we try to do is have one single big idea that we're building off of, and so
Everybody matters and they can change the world.
okay,
do. It's not just hearing, it's doing.
okay,
I think more building the throne, building His throne with worship for us to be into Him, with Him.
yeah,
Be in His presence.
An encounter with the Savior.
yeah.
I would say worship matters.
Worship
Yeah, worship
matters.
matters. More than we realize.
You are. Have something.
Yeah, yeah. And all of those would certainly be components of it,
Love your enemy.
Yeah, right, because that's the Samaritan context there. What I was really going for is that worship is far more essential to our spiritual formation than we really realize. That was, which includes all of those components. But I may not have really. Yeah, I said my big
you did
idea
say
is
it.
food. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you say. You got to really drill it in. So what that shows me is I went a little broad. I let it creep out on me a little bit into a lot of side issues, which the text all had there. None of those are wrong. They're not wrong at all. But if you can be more narrowly focused, the better. So
Worship.
yeah. So one of the things that happened was I chased too many rabbits. What were the takeaways? I'll get to them. Kind of did impact in your life. Well, let's ask specifically for you. Any others in your life? Takeaways?
I only wrote one thing down, and that was what you actually said at the end. And it says that God does not want us to worship because He needs it. He wants us to worship because we need it.
Yeah.
That's a huge takeaway from me today.
Yeah.
Because I definitely need it today.
I started to go, and I actually forgot to do it, but and the way I got to this big idea was from our Global Leadership Summit, my talk there, of the root problem. So most of us are struggling with declining worship attendance. And the reason for that is people are so busy. And the reason for that is people don't understand how important worship is. So that's why I chose to talk about it this way, is because I'm going, That's the root cause that's producing problems in our church. So what I have to do is cast a vision for people going, no, do not neglect this, because this is very important in your spiritual formation. And it's actually important in God's redemptive plan. So that peek behind the curtain how I got to that topic. What could have been improved?
I wanted to say the takeaway also is about the salvation versus justification. I loved learning like an actual, because I get asked by other denominations, well, are you saved? And I'm like, man, I'm tight with God, so just leave me alone. So anyway, I just love that. I love a little bit of, oh, that's why we don't say as Methodists, we are saved and blah, blah, blah. We don't go into that. We talk about the grace and the relationship, and that's what's vitally important to us. So I love that.
And so, Chuck, we would probably use the word follower. We're followers of Jesus, because there's a becoming, there's a continuing process. If somebody said, are you saved? I would say, yes.
Well, Wesley was saying being saved too. Wesley's
Right.
talk about it that way.
Yeah, which I would say is theologically correct. I'm not necessarily looking to have a deep theological conversation with every single person, so I would go, yeah.
That's what I like about running away from that.
Right, yeah, running away from the controversy, yeah. So I want specifically, how can we have improved? Because we're gonna do this again, with another group that we want to do
Wider
better.
spaces between the seats.
Yeah, it's a little more room. Okay, that's good. That's important, yeah.
Better
You're joining me
lighting,
in the
people
back.
with bad eyesight trying to read the words. I noticed some people struggling
Yeah,
to read the things, and so there wasn't. I loved the dim light, but at the same time you couldn't read. So I don't know how to solve that problem, but that's a problem.
yeah, I struggled with the same thing. That's why I had to get up with the grace. I was going, and I was nervous about it because I'm gonna have to read this passage and I can't see the words of the passage. So that caused me some anxiety.
I would like to know what you're reading. Like, nowhere did it say, I'm reading from John.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's real good. Yeah, John, yeah, 4. That would have been good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
great.
even on the paper here, so that.
Yeah, could have just put it on the paper, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
So what was the reason for the dim lights? I'm just real.
Atmosphere, yeah, we were trying to create intimate mood.
Which I really
With a
love that.
set.
We don't play with lighting in our church, and as a musical theater girl, I should recognize the importance of lighting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, without lighting on a concert or a stage, it's kind of flat. It
Yeah.
falls flat.
It also directs your attention to where we want you looking and removes distractions, although it can be a distraction.
Coming from Chicago, where you have to have police in the worship service, I was somewhat anxious, staying in a room that's dark.
Yeah.
And having been a part of the security team, you can't see what's going on. And in an urban setting, that would have been.
Yeah, that's a good point. And she raises a real good point too. You got to contextualize everything. So she's saying in some settings that would be totally inappropriate here. So we have the federal law enforcement base, so all the federal law enforcement officers are trained here. You're pretty safe when you're here because there's going to be, officers all around. But in some contexts, that's not the case. And you have, and even here we have to, like, one of the things we do now is 15 minutes after the service starts, all the exterior doors are locked from the outside. You can get out, but you can't get in. But that's a very good point.
So if you're late, how do you get in?
There's security out there that would just let you in, but you have to be escorted in. You couldn't just walk in. Yeah, that's more for children's space, more for children than others.
Since probably a minor detail for some people, but since I cry all the time over everything, Lynn ran to wherever to the back to get tissues, but if there were tissues already in place at every pew or.
That's good. Yeah, that's a really good solution. But because when you need a tissue, it's good to have it. But also it conveys that we're prepared and expect this to be a moving emotional experience, and we're prepared for that. So that would speak volumes and would be really good.
And even having someone that's, your ushers or your greeters that are already hyper aware for the service, be paying attention and come and serve her with a couple, box tissues and give her a little pat in the back. That would be huge, I think.
Yeah.
Really bad feeling to be in the middle of worship service and your nose.
Right.
Your makeup's going everywhere.
Yeah, right. Something else too, if you don't have tissues out, you may want to have little small bag there for the trash.
Could do that, yeah, so they can dispose of it, then they're not awkward going. Why would people want to come back?
Cause they feel comfortable. They feel loved.
They're hungry.
Because they learned something.
Yeah.
Felt the presence of God.
Because there's things that happen in a corporate worship environment that you can't get by yourself.
Yeah, that's really important, because people more and more are going online for stuff, but they're not having that community impact. So,
Everything really made church interesting again.
yeah, interesting.
It pretty much made the church interesting again. And see, it's one of our major problems. There's a lot of people who just don't see it as interesting something they should try and come to.
That was a fairly, what we would call typical flow for a service for us. We try not to do it the same always, because part of what keeps it interesting is changing it around a little bit. So we would probably have all those components, but sometimes we like having communion every week because it forces me to get to the cross and the talk. Forces me to get, somehow it's got to, now occasionally what we'll do is the talk will end, you'll kind of say a prayer if you're having a real hard time. Sometimes it really doesn't fit, so we may move the communion up earlier in the service, have the talk after that, so we can move the parts around. But if you can just simply change the order of things a little bit, it keeps people's interest better. That's a good way to kind of, even if you don't change any of the pieces, just change the sequence.
Prayer in the middle of
Song set.
song set is awesome. There's something-
Now, one of the things that we'll do sometimes, which we're talking about teaching prayer, we'll do the prayers to the people. So you'll write down your prayers and turn them in, and then we will read those out. So Ann and I'll be standing on stage, we're just going back and forth, either during communion or something where we're just reading out the prayers of the people. That means time is up. I had one other thought that I was going to. Oh, I know what it was. Closing thought. So we made a couple of switches in the middle of the service. There's things that I was just going, oh my gosh, we need to do this. And hopefully it for you didn't notice, but once I went in there and realized how dark it was, I realized you're not going to be able. I had planned to include y'all by reading the scriptures, and I knew you weren't going to be able to read that. So we made it audible to say, hey, when I get up, can you turn the lights on, and then turn the lights back off when I go to communion. So that was on the fly. And then I realized too, as we were singing, I'm going, they don't know who I am. So I had to sit back to Ann and go, Ann, you need to come up and introduce me. Now, I could have gotten up and introduced myself. That would have been fine. Okay? But what I was doing was I needed her to pass her credibility to me. I needed her to install me, if you would, and say, listen to him. And that's really important. When you have somebody coming in, you need to pass the torch to them and say, pay attention, listen. Which she did a great job with that. So, all right, good.
What do you mean when you say audible? Like you
Audible
inserted it
means
from
I changed the
audible?
play. We had to add. We adjusted something in the middle of the service. And I want to, and that's of course, you want to plan well, but don't be afraid of changing it, of tweaking it in the middle of it. Just that's okay. Yeah. The only real difficulty for that was it required me. I had to walk all the way out, and so typically, even though at that point I'm not sure if you knew I was the pastor or not, but people are watching you more than you realize. So when you walk, it can be a distraction for people. Like, where's he going? Is there a problem? A security problem or something? So. All right.
Is this is this all that you give out at church?
I don't usually even do that.
No.
Yeah. So
You don't have bulletins, you don't have notes?
well, we have
bulletins.
yeah, but
Right.
not sermon notes.
Okay.
Sometimes, but not normally.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the back of the bulletin, it open, it says notes, so that you got a full page.
Yeah, but it's not, our bulletins are not week specific in terms of a message. We do a series bulletin, which means that, that all of the announcements that people would need within that particular sermon series, so for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it is, all of the announcements are gonna be in there and it stays the same, but you've got a note-taking sheet on the back. So. All right, so in addition to evaluation, which is a big part of what we do, and talking about an evaluation of what happened, we also want to evaluate our facilities and our environment. The environment in which it happens actually is the thing that creates that first impression that sets the tone for the rest of your experience. Several years ago, when my 15-year-old was much younger, we had some people coming over to the house, and I was like, okay, Jacob, here's your list. These are all the things that you've got to do. You've got to clean your bedroom. You've got to come in here and clean the bathroom. And we got to vacuum. We got to sweep. We got to mop. We got to do all these things. And he's like, oh, why do we have to do this when it's just Uncle Jason? And I'm like, because this shows Uncle Jason that I care about him, that he doesn't come into a house that has stuff all over the floor where your underwear is in the bathroom. And it shows that, hey, I'm ready for you. I'm prepared for you. And I have taken the time to set the stage for our time together. And he's like, oh. But you know what? It's the same thing in church on a Sunday morning. When we come into a worship environment, especially from a first-time guest perspective, it needs to be that we have prepared and set the stage for them. This morning I came in and, our worship room is set up for Sunday and everything's fine. But you know what I did? I went and I kind of made sure that everything was just so, because I knew that all of you guys were coming. And I wanted to make sure that there was a good impression made, that everything that you needed was right where it needed to be. And that as you walked in the door, you were able to feel that sense of, oh, I'm home and it's comfortable. And I think that we need to pay really close attention to the message that our environment is speaking. Because your environment starts speaking before anybody else does. Before the first song happens, before the message is given, before the first prayer, your environment is speaking and it is communicating something. And so we need to make sure that it's actually communicating what we want to communicate. Do you guys know how long it takes to make a first impression? 7 seconds. 7 seconds. 7 seconds. I mean, think about what happens in 7 seconds, especially from a guest perspective. Now, here's the thing. When Jay was talking about evaluating and really making sure that we hear from those people that are new, the reason is that they see things that we don't see. We become blind to our environment because it's no longer a first impression. You guys saw things today, like the tissues, that we don't see anymore. We don't notice it. You guys see things today, like the space in between the chairs. We don't see that anymore because that's the way we do things. And so what we need to do is be able to look at things through a lens of a first-time person and gather their feedback and their input to see what is your first impression? What are our environments speaking? So here's what I want you guys to do for just a minute. Have a little bit of table talk time. And question number 1 is this. Think about the last time you were in a new restaurant. Okay, you went to a brand new restaurant. What was your first impression? First 7 seconds as you walked in the door. And how did you form that impression? What basis did you use to kind of create that first impression? And then number 2, think about your worship space. What do people see within the first 7 seconds of coming into your worship space? The first thing some of you guys saw was that sign, just breathe, you're home. Maybe the first thing you saw was the coffee. Maybe the first thing you saw was Mike handing out lyric sheets. Whatever that was, what do people see within the first 7 seconds of your space? Who do they see? That's a really key important question. Who do they see? And how does what they see and who they see influence their first impression? Okay, so I'd like for you guys to talk about that at your table and spend a few minutes talking about questions 1 and 2.
I can't remember.
Right.
And then I saw the menu, I was like, wow, that's expensive. That's why I thought I haven't been back. It was blue. Just
Yeah, it's like, okay, so what, you know, why not you? Whereas at Olive Garden, they give you one of those electronic. And you know,
And so we.
you're in line, how they're not gonna open. You know, it's a certain person where it says, think about it, worship space. And
You go
we
to
have
pray,
service, which
just
is what I- When I first started eating there, years ago.
pour like this, you turn and go down the boat.
There were a lot of people at the front door that was excited.
Well,
Inviting in.
Well, make sure you man, I told you.
And when I was there,
Talk about break time. Talk about places.
I finally.
An Irish is very.
With each other. To change that.
Change your life. And every She's never come to
Can you do,
Right.
Yeah, that's the worst one. The lights are not on. So what I started doing was, I told first thing is drive around like that. Yeah, we got to come in and turn it on. And turn the lights on. Yeah. Put the lights on the cross. Those lights Nobody puts the lights on. The final question is, how does that influence their impression? I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is church. I'm trying to get somebody that's before they're out. I go to the church. So I don't.
All right. So if I can get your attention up this way. One of the things that I heard at this table over here is looking at your environment through that lens helps you see things that you might want to change and improve, right? But leading that change is not always easy. correct? Especially when there's a broken down something in the entryway and this was donated by my great grandma 100 years ago and nobody needs to touch it or move it. One of the things that we've done around here from time to time, and especially as this was several years ago when we were thinking about first impressions and what that looked like, where we actually started, before we started a security team in our parking lot, was we took the people who were going to be invested in implementing those changes, we took them off-site and we went and worshiped somewhere else. And we went to a couple of different services throughout maybe a month and a half or something like that. And it was so interesting because before we started talking about, hey, we need people in the parking lot, helping to help people park, security, that kind of thing, we became guests in someone else's worship environment. And as we were pulling in there, we had this, big, huge carload full of us. And the people in the back were like, where do we park? Like, I don't know. I mean, there's there's a person that's showing us where to park. And so then we would go park there and we'd walk in and, we'd be given a bulletin. But of course we went to Jacksonville. And so it had been an hour ride in the car and they were like, where's the restroom? Oh, there's a sign for the restroom. Oh, okay. And so all of a sudden we became the guests. And all of these people that were going to be leading the change became the guests. And then we began to have this conversation at lunch. So what were the things that you noticed? What were the things that maybe were missing? What were the things that you appreciated having? Someone in the parking lot, a big restroom, this way sign. What are the things that you experienced? And then thinking about, what do people experience in our facilities? Do we have adequate signage? What was your first impression when you walked in? Well, this. You automatically make assumptions and jump to conclusions based on your environment. Your mind begins to categorize, oh, this church must be this, or they must believe this, or this is what their environment says about them. And all of those things that you are thinking as a guest, as a new person, filter into your way of thinking and how you perceive the rest of the worship environment. And so by helping people enter that space where they are not comfortable, where they're brand new and experiencing that for the first time, then you can begin to help them look at their current space with a fresh set of eyes, with a new outlook. Because they've been uncomfortable, now they can understand what it's like for a guest that comes into your worship space and may feel a little bit uncomfortable. So hopefully that is a strategy that you guys might be able to use in order to help you begin to lead some of those changes. So as I was talking about the way that your brain kind of sorts through information based on first impressions, what I want to do is give you guys the chance to have a couple of first impressions about some worship spaces, some sanctuaries. And I want you guys at your table just to talk about your first impressions of these spaces. I'm just going to put a picture up on the screen, and there are some questions. There's a sheet of questions at your table that you guys can use. You don't have to answer all of these questions as you go through, but here are the questions. Do you think the church is willing to change and grow? As you see their environment, what does that reveal about kind of who they are and how they operate? Does this church know who they are and who they are called to be? Or does it seem that they're kind of confused or they don't know? What is the mood or tone set by this environment? Okay. What thoughts or emotions does it elicit within you? What obstacles or roadblocks might this environment create for guests? Okay. So these are just some of the questions that you guys can talk about as you look at each of these environments. Now, here's the thing. Are you going to be able to accurately predict all of the time, without a shadow of a doubt, whether or not they have a firm mission statement and know who they are? No, but your guests can't either. What they're doing is they're making judgments based on their first impressions. And so I want you guys to kind of get in that mindset of what does that look like from a guest perspective. So I'm just gonna cycle through, I'll, give you guys maybe a minute or two at each of these things. I think I have 6 pictures. Just to talk about your first impressions, maybe some of those questions or maybe something else, okay? Here's the first sanctuary. And I think I'll dim the lights so you guys can see it. So you guys go ahead and talk about, what are your first impressions?
Tradition. I really like the oh, yeah.
I do like sliding the cross.
That's yeah, that's where your eyes first.
It does, don't it? Yeah.
Well, they kind of raise them so they can get rid of it when they want to.
To me, it makes me feel, it makes it feel like it's trying
Are you gonna say it's all out?
Yes, yes.
I think, trying
Is that a banner?
Next one.
First thing that comes to mind.
I like the plan. I was gonna say,
I like how comfortable it is.
that's over.
I like it.
They're like industrial.
Yeah.
Yeah, let-
They also.
They got a break.
It's
not always true.
There's a lot of
Not necessarily expecting that.
So like a content.
Very nice.
It's all about.
I think that's fine. A lot of the sheriff's office, first impression, you don't have to sit with your.
Yeah, everybody.
Not willing to change.
Get them through books.
You can sleep on that hard.
You're too far away, you're too far away.
Yes, yeah.
It's got, I guess those are speakers or something. Or they fit, it's pretty old stuff.
Just because.
Those traditional. There's the cross and the open and
Sure. just see a piano, right?
What did you say? Well, okay, one thing I don't is that everything else is like,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
So we're.
Yeah, it's like, we're here to teach you about business practices. Is it falling down? Too many people saw me. So you know from there, you know.
Hey, so let me throw a question for you to consider. So looking at this one, what would the environment say differently? How would you experience it differently if you just simply, with no building program, no changing, if you changed the orientation and you went sideways and you turned all the chairs into a semicircle and you did the stage area on this side over here as opposed to that? Talk about going all you're doing is putting the chairs in a different place. But talk about how that would change that environment a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Except the frost, there's nothing to.
Yeah.
People freak out in the wheelchair. Yeah.
That might be.
It does. So, I mean, that looks like my 8th grade school auditorium.
Yeah.
And I remember getting up and singing, Michael. That's what it
That's why it's good.
All right. So let me ask you guys, did all of you guys have the same first impression at every single picture?
No.
And why was that?
Perception.
Perception,
Different experiences.
experiences,
Age,
age, background. Yeah, for sure. And here's the thing that's important for us to understand is that not every person is going to have the same guest experience. Not every person is going to draw the same first impression. But we need to pay attention to it. It's really, really, really important. So we've actually given you guys in your notebooks, we've given you guys some tools for paying attention to your facilities, for paying attention to your environment. If you guys will look in your notebook on page 32, you're gonna see that this is a facilities prayer walk that we have used at the Chapel Ministries to pay attention to our facilities and to really intentionally think about what are our buildings and facilities saying to people when they come through. And not only are we looking and evaluating, but we're walking through these facilities and we're praying for the different people that will be experiencing them for the first time. So all of this is done with a heart of, look, God, you've got to be in and through all of it, but we've got to do our part in helping people be able to sit and relax and come to trust. So then they can be open to receiving what God has for them. If you guys have somebody, a guest that is dropping children off for the first time and they don't feel comfortable in children's ministry dropping their kids off, what is their worship experience going to be like? It's not going to be the same, is it?
They're gonna be worried about their kids.
Exactly.
They're gonna be distracted by that.
Yeah. Or let's say that you walk in, your stomach's grumbling, you didn't get a chance to eat breakfast, and there's no coffee available, you're already in a bad mood because you hadn't had your coffee, and what does that do for someone's worship experience? Or they can't find a place to park and they're circling the building, they don't know where to park, they want to park in somebody's spot, right? And so then they're worried about it. Oh, well maybe I parked in the pastor's spot, I don't know, what is that? And they're worried about it. So this tool helps us as leaders who are blind to our facilities see things from a guest perspective and prayerfully walk that out. And so what you can do is, using this tool, you go outside the building into your parking lot and you work through these questions and you pray about it, and then you make some notes, and then you go into the entrance of the church and you stop there and you look at your foyer area or whatever you guys call it, and you say, okay, what is a guest experience here? What are they thinking? What are they feeling when they walk here for the first time? And then you move into children's ministry. And what are parents feeling when they drop their kids off? Then you move into the sanctuary worship environment. And what are people feeling? What are they seeing for the very first time? And prayerfully considering, how am I called to create an environment where people can encounter God? And so hopefully this tool will help you guys begin to see that. Another tool that we have in your notebook for you guys is on page 36. You will see a secret shopper evaluation form. How many of you guys have ever, has anybody ever been like a secret shopper in a restaurant before? Okay, a few of you guys. So when I was starting out, I think at 15, I began working at Chick-fil-A in the mall here in Brunswick. And one of the things that we were a part of was the secret shopper program, where people would come in and they would order whatever it is that they were supposed to order, and then they would rate their guest experience. Well, when I heard about that, I was like, so you never know. And they're like, you never know. And sometimes we would get back a secret shopper evaluation, and it would be, they would name names. They would say, this is the person that waited on me. This was my experience. This was what the dining room looked like. This is what happened. And I just remember thinking, because I never know, I've got to make it right for every single person, which was the goal, right? Here's what I would love for you guys to do and challenge you guys to do. From time to time, get people outside your church to come to your church as secret shoppers. They can be people that go to another church, yes, but better yet, invite somebody who would never go to a church and say, you know what, we are trying to make sure that we pay attention to guests, and I would love for you to help me with this so we can improve the way that we treat our guests. And give them this form to fill out, but then be ready to receive that feedback when it comes back. That is a true eye-opening experience, and it will allow you to see the things that you don't see. We did this several years ago. We've done it quite a few times. We did it several years ago in preparation for a hospitality team training that we were doing with those people that are on our host team, coffee team, greeters, all of those kinds of people. And so we gave out probably about 4 or 5 of these secret shopper evaluation forms. And over the course of a month and a half, maybe, these people came in and then they'd fill out the form and they would leave their comments for us. And you know what we discovered? It was really interesting that people who came in the back door of our sanctuary had a much different experience than people who came in the front door of our sanctuary. And so we started to think, oh, wow, we're not paying attention to all of our entrances. And so in order to make that a better, more welcoming place, we began to put more host team members. So now we have 2 host team members at the back door. And they're paying attention for people who are kind of lost, who look like they don't know where to go. And they're sending people up to the front door saying, hey, you've come in the back door. That's where family come in. We are so glad that you're here. We would love for you to head around to the other side of the church and grab some coffee and visit the info station, whatever that looks like. And they're helping us pay attention to that because we began to see, man, these people are not feeling welcomed. They're saying that no one was there to hand them a bulletin. And that's the last thing that we want. But then we received great feedback from those people that came in the right door. And we're saying, we don't know where people are coming in. So we've got to be prepared at both entrances to make sure that people are having a good experience. So that secret shopper form is really going to be helpful for you guys as you continue to try to think about what is that first impression and what does your environment speak and communicate to people as they come in for the very first time. Any questions about those 2 forms before I kick it back to Jay? All right, Jay, you're up.
So kind of building on what Ann said there, we make assumptions and we think everybody thinks and behaves like we do, and sometimes they're wrong. So for us, the back door is, our assumption is that's where the family comes in. You know, that's where the people that are regulars kind of come in that back door. Hey, Ann, go ahead and put the lights back on.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is that's where people who are lost come in. I mean, they don't know where to go, so they're people that come in there are the ones that don't know what's going on. That's how they stumbled on that door, so we had to kind of flip that around. So we're going to talk a little bit about the next component of worship now, which is with music. Talk about music a little bit, and I'm going to move fairly quickly on it. But kind of picking up on the conversation we were having, I asked Tom Tanner years ago when we first started the church, I called him and I said, Tom, what's the most important job at the church? What's the most important role? He said, our director of communication. You did for a while. So I said, well, is it the role on a particular person that you have? And he said, well, it may be the person that we've got. The person we've got in that role has done a really good job. It's really important. But that's what we do. We're in the communication business, and we're communicating everything. So our print and communication, all that. Years later, I went back to see him again, and I said, you told me years ago that this was the most important position. Is that you still think that way? Oh, no, that's totally wrong. And I said, oh, really? I said, what's the most important role? He said, it's not a role, it's a relationship. The relationship between your worship team is the most important thing about your church. Your choir director, your music director, your pastor, and the members of that, the people that are leading worship from the podium. If those relationships are not real, if they're not solid, it's like a clog in the pipeline. So you got to do whatever you got to do to get those relationships real. Now that doesn't mean perfect. It means real. That they're being honest with each other, dialogue, and you sharing that you got some tensions there. If there's tensions there, that's going to stop the flow. So this morning, worship is a fountain that flows. That clogs up the pipeline. So you really got to work just on the relationship component there. You got to be able to be in sync with each other, not just mechanically, but that the relationship is well there. Once that's done, then you think about the music part that the worship leaders will be leading. There's a couple of different things that you need to consider. And Josh, feel free to jump in here, and you're much more of an expert on this than me. But obviously, when you're picking music, you want to think about the lyrics. So they need to thematically tie into what you're doing. This may be a great song that your congregation loves to sing, but does it tie into the message of the day? It's irrelevant. It's got to connect thematically. So you look at the words that they align. 2, there is an energy level. So as you're moving through the movements of the service, you want to get songs that are the right energy level. And then 3, you want to look at connectivity, context with the audience. So is this song going to fit the demographic that you're connecting with that's there? That can be, you're really wanting this is going to be a response. That's not the time to sing a song they're not going to connect with and not know. Or it could be, like today we were trying to mix in hymns and different things, which we wouldn't necessarily normally do, but because of the context of you, we go into, well, some of the songs we sing wouldn't fit this context, so we consider that. So you have theme, you have energy, and then you have contextualization with the service. Okay? So I want to think a little bit about theme first. As you think about our worship service today, what were some of the words from the songs that you can, if you remember it, and Josh, you have to help us here with this, that sort of tied into the theme of the greatness of God and the worship and the attributing worth to God. That was kind of the theme of the service, was worship. So what did you hear that led into that?
Greater you, Lord.
I mean, there it is, right there. Boom, that's attributing worth to God. So that was definitely it.
Right now, Lord.
Yep, right, same thing.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because life is lived in response to that love. So it's the same theme right there through the music. Everything that I was saying was tied in and said also through words.
Found a big blessing.
Yeah, right, from the hymn there, exactly. And that ties into the fountain. It's also about the fountain of worship, the fountain of that. It's all linked in there together.
The moment, the now. The holy moment. It's like
Being in the presence of God now. Yeah. Yeah. That's centering of being there. Yeah. Which tied into the call of worship. That was the call of worship and then went into that. Now what you'll find, part of what you want to think about is, as a teacher, we tend to be sermon-centric. We tend to think that the sermon is the main thing. It's not. The whole service is giving the message. Everything from when Ann first started there to the welcoming all the way through the driving in. There's one sort of theme that's working through that. We'll be talking more about that coordinating and planning. But you want to be mindful of not just making the sermon not fit with everything else. So you want to be collaborating in the planning. Now, for me, what I find is that there's a lot of intentionality in that, and there's just a lot of God's grace in that. If you're intentional, you start going, I didn't even catch that. I didn't even know that. But it kind of comes together. And if you're the one doing the teaching, pay attention. Pay attention to the lyrics of the song, and you might go, I'm going to weave that in. So some of the things, I'm listening to the songs, and I'm picking those up, and I'm going to work that into my talk there. I don't necessarily sit down and look at all the lyrics of the song beforehand. I know the general theme, but I may pick up on nuances of the song that I want to weave in there. Let's talk about energy, okay? What I'd like to do is kind of chart our energy for that service we had this morning. You know what I mean by energy? Like it's sometimes it's exciting, it's good, and other times it's kind of reflective. So one being low, one is very low energy, and 10 being the highest. What would you say the energy level was of, let's say, the welcome? When Ann was first welcome when she came in, where would you put the meter on energy on that?
What's the scale?
1 is low, 10 is high.
7.
So, okay. You understand my question?
I was trying to remember the welcome.
You want to give them a couple of words you said that might jar their memory?
Yeah, it was welcome to the chapel. We're glad you're here. Connection cards.
Restrooms.
Meet me at the info station. I'm going to give you a gift. All of that information.
5? Yeah. And typically in the welcome, you got to start with enough energy to get their attention, but then you got to kind of bring it down because it's somewhat calming. We'll somewhat calm you down a little bit there. We're not trying to get your blood pressure up. Your blood pressure's already up because you're nervous about it. So the goal of the welcome is this. If I can get them from here to here, that's a win. You know? If you can get them from they're sitting there like this, they can kind of go, all right, let's see. That's the win there. All right, so then we went into the first song, Come Thy Fount. What would be the energy level of that song?
5.
That's exactly what we were shooting for. That was on our goal was a 5, so that was around 5. How about the call to worship? That was when I read Psalm 95. Would you say 6?
I said 6.
That's exactly what we were shooting for. Yeah, exactly. So at that point, we're starting to build a little bit. We're trying to pick up the energy a little bit. It was a little bit hard for me to do it. You did great on the scripture. I was having trouble seeing the text, so I couldn't be quite as dramatic because I was a little anxious at that point. Okay? And then we went into holy moment with Gracie and great are you, Lord.
6 and 7. I mean, it's just grows.
Yeah. So we're building there.
Yeah.
So we were shooting for a 7, 8 range.
Yeah.
That's what we were shooting. So the energy was starting to pick up there. And then we went into prayer time. That was when we did the all praying simultaneously.
Back to 5.
You said 5? Yeah, 5, yeah. So that's a tough one, okay? Because you don't have a lot of control over that because you don't know how people are going to kind of get into it. So sometimes it can kind of elevate up on you, and sometimes it kind of goes down a little bit. And it's okay to have some elements where you don't have total control of it. That's actually good. But you're paying attention to that, okay? So for me at that point, I could tell that the group was still a little bit a little hesitant, a little timid. So I was really going to need to get a little closer to y'all and really engage y'all in conversation. So at that point, I was really glad I'd done the scripture passing out because if I had got up and just read the scripture gone, y'all would have gone back to this song. But this was going to keep you going. So and then we had the message. No, we had how great thou art after prayer time, which was high. That was we went up to. We were shooting we were building. It was going to start low with the prayer, and then it built up. So that was a sort of a building up a momentum. So we went up to an 8 there, and then the message. Where would you put the message?
Over the top.
Say again.
Over the top.
Over the top. Yeah, no, 11.
Yes.
So I was shooting. What I was shooting for was, for me, my style is I like it handed to me high. So I tend to like the music high. I had planned on starting with my mama's J Boy, Don't Say Everything Comes In, which that was energy. I added in the priest role there just because that was just on my heart at that point. But I wanted to pick it up high with laughter and then drop it down to about a 7 is what I was shooting for. So it wasn't.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to just like this, but I was trying to keep the energy level up high. And then we went into communion, which we were shooting for like a 4.
Yeah.
So we were really looking for big reflection.
Came through and the music, as you were explaining everything, it brought the mood down.
Right.
Which was good because to me, as you're doing the explanation of communion, it kind of pulls to inner reflection.
Right.
Which is what you want.
Okay. How did we do that? You felt the energy go from here to here. Specifically, how did we do that?
Dimming the lights.
Dim the lights. That was one thing. We dimmed the lights down.
Went back to the room.
Yeah, so we changed. We had flow to back, so it sort of took your attention off of it, and the front became a little emptier. What else?
The gentle music playing.
Exactly. So they came up and started playing some soft music behind me.
And you didn't have to go.
And exactly. So you could sit.
The time of self-reflection before everybody didn't get up at once for you. We kind of scattered. So there was time to pray and get in your own. Like for me, it was very intense, even though it was a low level of energy because it was so personal.
So that's really good. So it can be intense and emotional and powerful, but still calm. Yeah. The other thing was the questions are reflective. So I give a question and my pace. slowed way down. I had been talking like this, and then I went into questions, and I was calm. If I had been on stage, I would have sat down. I would have just sat on my stool and began to talk. Whenever you sit down, that slows it down. So there was lighting, there was music, there was reflective question, and there was the speed of the tempo. All that brought the energy down and gave time to it. And then the drive it home.
Jay, talk a little bit about driving home. That's an internal conversation, like an internal word for us. Talk a little bit about that point in the service.
I went to turn the lights back up, so I missed exactly what you said. So you may have to add to that. But the drive it home is the response that we're calling for after the service. So there will be elements of responding and movement within the service, but we always want to have some close that drives the point home, but also it's something for you to do on the drive home. So that it's some application, some living out of the message. Because we believe what happens outside of worship is even as important as what happens in worship. So there's going to be some sort of call to action in the sending forth. That we'll talk more about this in the sermon prep, but when I'm working on talk, I'm going to be thinking about what do I want you to know, what do I want you to feel, what do I want you to do. And that do will be brought up in the drive home.
So in this case, the drive at home was me saying, hey, we're getting ready to leave here and we're getting ready to plan worship and, as a corporate experience, but don't forget that worship is personal. That worship is something that we do, it's not something we go to. So it was kind of that last thought that you guys pointed out.
And interestingly, when I was saying what was the big idea from it, that some of you picked up on that. You picked up on that more than you did on my talk, because that's the last thing. Your first impression is real important, and the last thing that you send them out with, and you want to make sure the last thing is not a tangent off of your main thing. So the goal for that is not, it shouldn't be pep rally 7, 8, 9, but it should be like a 5 or 6. So the communion, it should be higher than the communion moment. So when you go through your reflective time, now we want to lift the energy back up as we send you out. So we want you to go out kind of inspired. Does that make sense? So we literally have energy levels that we're shooting through during the service. So we're looking and going, when we're going to go up and where we're going to go down. And so the worship team will often ask me, say, so how do you want us to hand it to you today, high or low? And typically for me, it's high. Some of our other teachers, they like it low. They want it down and they'll take it down and bring it up. My typical flow is high to down to low and then back up to high. That's kind of my normal bent to do that. Yours was a little bit different because there was not a whole bunch of emotion in the talk today. It was pretty informational. So it was. All right. Yeah.
This might be just my own personal struggle. I might be just speaking out of turn. But I come as the daughter of a very manipulative Baptist preacher who was very controlling of his congregation, and I sometimes struggle with the bisectionality of intentional worship planning and manipulation of my congregation. And I don't want to be open to the leading of the Holy Spirit. And I'm a performer. I know how to make people feel things. I know how to make them cry. I know how to make them laugh. And so how much of that is me manipulating them and controlling them to make them feel what I want them to feel, and how much of that is planning?
So that is a great question. And as long as you're answering that, as long as you're asking that question, I feel fine about you. You follow me? Yeah. So I didn't actually tell you the 4th question. So there's 4 questions to talk prep for worship planning. What do I want them to know? That's information. What do I want them to feel? That's motivation. What do I want them to do? That's application. The 4th question is, how does the gospel motivate that behavior? Okay. And that is the litmus test of going, is it fear that you're trying to use? Is it manipulation? Because that is not the gospel. The only way a life can be lived correctly is if it's lived in response to the reality of God's love. So that's the 4th question, is the one that keeps you from falling in that ditch, which is a very good thing that you're aware of, because a lot of times we can be so passionate about wanting to get people to do this that we use some inappropriate ways to try to manipulate and do that. I'll tell you another quick story. So the way we started doing communion all the time in the chapel, we kind of stumbled on it, because my big thing is listen to God and do whatever He says. And I don't know for certain what God's telling Nick to do. I do know that God's calling Nick to do something. And I do know that he's going to be only fulfilled when he does it. But I'm a little hesitant to say this is what he's calling you to do. So we're always going to call for people to respond. But how is a little bit difficult. So in the early days, we would say, he may be calling you to go get reconciled with somebody. He may be calling you to ask forgiveness of somebody. He may be telling you to go and invite somebody. He may be calling you to the altar to pray. He may be calling you to take communion. So it'd be multiple ways to respond. And so at the end, we would just say, so you respond however God's calling. And everybody kept going to communion. So we started going, well, I guess everybody wants to. So it kind of became a normal pattern for us. So sometimes you can go a little broader on your response, so to resist the temptation to be manipulative. Going, I'm just saying do whatever he's telling you to do. We now are a little bit more specific on it. Like we want you to go and get somebody and bring them to church with you. Here's an invitation card to use. But do it not because you're guilting them, but do it because you've experienced love that you want them to experience. All right, so on your table are some lyrics of some songs. What I like your table to do is to pick one of them or two of them, and you're going to say, what would the energy level of this song be? What would it start? What would it end? And look at the words and say, what would be some of the themes for which you could utilize this song? So this song would be good in this spot or this theme.
Repeat instructions, please.
Yeah, so you have a stack of lyrics, so you'll pick one of them, and you'll go, so what would y'all say? And then look at what's that mean? Like that song. Right. That one go. Yeah. That one, you go. Yeah. Like that one, I feel like you're telling me something. Is that a
showed up at 5 on Sunday.
How do you guys offer?
All of them.
Yeah, and the last verse goes, I will not boast. Sense of unworthiness, reckless love.
I think it was high to higher. They didn't get better how you see it, right?
Yeah, there's
But I see something that just makes me want.
Yeah, there's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb. Coming after you, there's no wall you won't break down. Fight, won't tear down, coming after you.
See, I like songs that, so like they say that like 3 or 4 times. Each time, they just love it louder. I love it. As people, I'm almost yelling at you. Wow, that's awesome.
And the repetition, when I'm they would sing the same song 15 times. And each time they start high, each time they get lower and lower. But when you did that, I mean, it was about the 4th time. Because you would think about the words, you hear the
Well, I'm
words,
tired of it.
and you really
Well, I got-
worship some
I got-
to sing our songs. Don't give
I
us.
got
We don't think our songs that we're worshiping. You know, it's just a emotion. You know, sometimes I ask myself, did I do it? You know, because it's so routine. Yeah, my mind sometimes gets to wander. Like during a song where you're listening to it, and I know it's good out there. So there's a prayer, you know. And so someone did that to make that. Yeah. Yeah.
They don't break it.
We're starting to into it. I like that. Yeah.
Where?
And I'm so caught up in the order of things that it's hard to question sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really hear on the other side. How like I get so worship myself, I'm like, is anybody worshiping?
That's for me, that's a real solid song. It's like it's a 7 song, but you can still be loud.
So that's all, yeah. I'm always singing, that's how I feel about myself.
One more minute.
I love the others.
So I think
And whether you know.
True.
Because we all do this. And like I can I mean, just the song. Was hurting. Your hands.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. My son was one of the older so I should have saw that from
All right, let me get your attention back up this way. We'll continue this good conversation over lunch. Before we get lunch, what I'd love for you guys to do is just reflect. We've heard a lot this morning already, right? We've thought about a lot of really important things. We've heard a lot. I want you in your mind to take a moment and just think about what is your one big takeaway from this morning. One big takeaway from this morning. You can sum it up and you were like, this is really, really crucial. What would you say is your one big takeaway? If you want to share, you can share it out loud.
Then we need to revamp the entrance to our church. My foyer needs an upgrade.
There we go. All right, so environment specific to your context, for sure.
Yeah. Worship is everything.
Being intentional.
Worship is everything.
Worship is everything.
Yeah.
worship creates an environment truly that you encounter God.
Absolutely.
I think, worship's not God, it's for us.
Oh,
I think I would say just the opposite. I would say worship is not for us, it's for God, but then He is so gracious that He gives us the ability to connect with Him through that. So we receive something, but that's not the point of it. So
We worship Him, but it helps us.
absolutely, as a byproduct,
Yeah.
it's not the point. Yeah, for sure.
One thing was, let our life be a response to God. I know I always pray like, show me, teach me, tell me. But for me, that's kind of like, just shut up and listen for a second. I'm already telling you. Just respond to me right now.
What if you would
Put me
already,
in, get me out of it.
yeah, sometimes I think God says to me, stop talking and just do the thing I've already
Yeah.
told you to do. Don't keep asking for new stuff, just do the thing I've already told you to do, and then we'll move on from there, right? That's good.
I was just gonna say, I plan worship at our church. And today, just that one little moment with the prayer, the acts, prayer. I feel like we try to do a good job of moving things around the music, how we place things, how we do it. But I've never thought about changing up how we do prayer. So that stuck out. It's not always just the pastor or somebody.
Yeah. And after lunch, we're gonna talk a whole lot more about prayer. All right. Well, let's go ahead and pray and thank God for the food, and then we will move that way. We have Firehouse subs, turkey and ham, and there are a couple of extra meals over there for my two friends that need the special meal. And then we've got iced sweet tea, unsweet tea. The Firehouse lady forgot our lemonade. She's bringing it back. So for those, I know there are a lot of people that like the half and half thing in here. So it's coming. Okay, it's coming, friends. And what I would like to offer to you guys is you were able to see our sanctuary environment in there. Some of you guys might be curious, what's in the rest of the buildings? Well, I'll do a little chapel ministry tour after we eat lunch. So we'll spend, maybe 20, 25 minutes eating lunch or whatever. And then we will, I'll just call you guys. Josh, will you get that receipt for me, please? And then I will call you guys to the door and kind of take you guys around. If you want to see the rest of our children's ministry facilities, then I'll take you on a tour. Yes.
Are there restrooms in this?
Yes, right around the corner. All right, let's pray. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for this opportunity to come together, God, first and foremost to worship you, to spend time in your presence, and then to come into this place, God, where we can really explore how to provide environments where people can encounter you and worship. God, I ask that you'll continue to bless our conversation. I ask that you will be in the midst of everything that we do moving forward today, and that you will bless this food to our body. In your name I pray, amen. All right, help yourself.